Good morning, boys and girls. Happy Digital Day. Our lesson today includes a review on figurative language, since we are using figurative language to help us visualize this week. A couple of things we need to work on with figurative language are that we need to be able to identify the type of figurative language that we found and interpret it. So just to review, here are our learning intentions, and in order to be a 3 on this standard, you need to be able to complete all of the following. Number 1, I know and can identify different types of figurative language, including similes, metaphors, personification, onomatopoeia, idioms, and hyperboles. Remember, I think we're pretty good at actually picking out the figurative language in the text. It's just that we can't always identify which type of figurative language is being used. So work on that. Today's lesson should help you review, and you will practice in the worksheet provided for your Digital Day folder. Number 2, I can differentiate between different types of figurative language. This is what I just talked about. When you're looking at a piece of figurative language, you need to know the difference between it. Number 3, I can find examples of figurative language in text, this is what we're pretty competent at so far. Still finding idioms is kind of difficult, but we'll keep working on that. And number 4, I can analyze and interpret figurative language to determine and make sense of what I am reading. So differentiating between what the author says and what they really mean. So that's part of today's lesson as well. We're going to talk about the difference between literal and figurative, knowing the difference between the two of those. Let's watch this short video clip to learn the difference between literal and figurative language. So literal language is when the author means exactly what they say. If the author says she was a cow, well, maybe the character actually is a cow in the text. Or maybe we're looking at a cow and we're saying she is a cow. We mean exactly what we say. So in this example, we literally mean this background color is red. There's no kind of underlying meaning here. We mean exactly what we say when we say the background color is red. So figurative language is when we say something, but we mean something else. So what we are saying doesn't have its normal meaning. So in this case, maybe when I say she was a cow, maybe I'm meaning that the person is overweight. Or if I say she is like a snake, she's not really a snake. Maybe she's just a sneaky type of character. As stated in the video, you might hear figurative language also referred to as figures of speech. In this example, the author is trying to use a simile to show you what the background of this video clip looks like. They use a simile using like to compare the background to a crumpled piece of paper. It's not really a crumpled piece of paper, it's just what it looks like. Remember, there are many types of figurative language. We covered a handful of them in class. So looking at this list, we covered alliteration, hyperbole, metaphor, simile, onomatopoeia, personification, and idioms. These are the ones that I'm requiring you to know, be able to identify, and find in text. So now we know figurative language is language used to create special meaning or effect, and we cannot take it literally. We cannot take it at face value. We need to do some interpretation so we can figure out what the author is really trying to say. So let's go through each type of figurative language that we've talked about in class and look at some examples so that we can practice interpreting them and know how to pick them out in a text. The first example of figurative language that we are going to review is a simile. A simile compares two things using like or as. So when you see that the author is comparing something, take a look closely at that example and see if it uses the words like or as. If it does, this should signal that you are looking at a simile. It should stand right out to you. Similes are pretty easy to identify. There are other types of figurative language that are more difficult. So in this example, it says Ripley is as lazy as a sloth. This is what the author says. Clearly, if we're reading the text, we know that Ripley is not a sloth. So we have to figure out what exactly the author is trying to say. Figuratively, this is what the author means. If we think about a sloth, sloths are very slow, they don't move fast. So when somebody compares someone to a sloth using a simile, they're just trying to say that that person is lazy. The next type of figurative language is a metaphor. A metaphor is very similar to a simile in the fact that it compares two things. But instead, a metaphor is comparing two things by saying it is or it was or they are the same thing. So, if we take a look at the example here, it says the clouds were cotton balls in the sky. It doesn't say the clouds were like cotton balls in the sky, but it says they actually were cotton balls in the sky. So, what the author says is they were actually cotton balls. That's not true. If we look up in the sky, there are no cotton balls in the sky. Instead, what the author means is that the clouds are very, very fluffy, like a cotton ball would be. Remember, metaphors compare two things, so you might see a comparison in the text, but they do not use like or as. A little bit more difficult to pick out than a simile. In class, we also talked about personification. Remember, in the word personification, they use the word person. So an easy way to remember this type of figurative language is that we're making something that is not a human, a non-living thing, act like a human, or making it have a human quality. So for example, the snowflakes danced on the ground. Well, we know that snowflakes can't dance. Just like this. Snowflakes don't have legs. They can't move around. So, what the author says is the snowflakes danced. We know that's not true. So we have to figure out what this example means in a figurative way. Instead, this is what the author means. They mean that the snowflakes are falling to the ground, just kind of drifting, almost as if they are dancing across the sky. This next type of figurative language is a favorite of many of you. So the figurative language is an onomatopoeia. This is actually a sound device. The author uses it to show action. It doesn't necessarily need to be interpreted. What it is when we read the word, it actually sounds like the sound. So let's take a look at a few examples here. When we say the word hiss, it sounds like the actual hissing of a snake. Similarly, when we say the word sizzle, it sounds like the sizzling of bacon. Onomatopoeia is when we say the sound, it makes the sound of the actual sound. The next type of figurative language also needs no interpretation. It is simply a sound device that authors use to make a text seem a little bit more, kind of give it a little bit more like a sing-song effect. They're trying to give movement to the text and make it sound, give it rhythm. So the type of figurative language is called alliteration, and that's when we repeat the same beginning sound back to back to back in a row in a text. So the common example is Sally sells seashells by the seashore. If we take a look here, the sounds Sally sells seashells by the seashore. We have this repetition of sound as well. Gives kind of a little, almost like a sing-songy effect. It gives it rhythm. It makes it a little bit more interesting. This is often used in poetry. Sometimes authors use it in the text too. Another couple simple examples would be like Dunkin' Donuts, or let's say Walt Whitman. They have the same consonant sound in a row. Now, something to keep in mind here is just because the letters are the same doesn't mean they will always give the same sound. So, for example, G can make the J sound, or it can make the G sound. So you have to be careful and not just look at the actual letter, but think about the sound that the letter is making. The next type of figurative language is called a hyperbole. A hyperbole is when the author is exaggerating about something. They're going way over the top. And so this is kind of an easy one to identify because you know they really don't mean the exaggeration that they're using in the text. For example, this hyperbole states that my homework took 8 million years to finish. Well, we clearly know that your homework can't take 8 million years to finish, or else you'd look like this. Instead, what it really means is that the homework is taking a long time and maybe you're getting a little frustrated with it. So oftentimes, especially with kids, they use exaggerations with their homework, with their chores, with the way how long things are taking. So this is a popular type of figurative language to use. We really don't mean what we're saying. We really don't mean it takes that long or it weighs that much. We're just exaggerating for effect. We'll round out our list with our final type of figurative language, which is an idiom. An idiom is when the author says one thing and means another. They don't mean exactly what they say. These are kind of difficult to pick out in a text and difficult to identify when you're looking at types of figurative language. But if you take a look at what the author is saying, you know it doesn't mean exactly what it says. So the example we're looking at here is the test was a piece of cake. The test wasn't really a piece of cake, obviously. So let's figure out what it means. This is what the author says. If a test were a piece of cake, I'd be wanting to take tests every single day. Instead, what the author means is that the test was really, really easy. So when you're looking at idioms, think about what the author says and what they mean, and then they should be a little bit easier to identify in the text. Now that we have reviewed the different types of figurative language, I have a little assignment for you. I would like you to read the short story, Grace's Canoe Trip, and answer the questions below. If you need to refer back to the video to review the figurative language that is being addressed in the question, you may do so. Remember, this assignment is due 24 hours after our digital day, so I expect them to be turned in on Friday. Otherwise, the resulting consequence will be that you will be zapped. If you have any questions, you can feel free to contact me on Class Dojo. Thanks, and see you tomorrow.